Hi class, this screencast is intended to help you evaluate sources. As you're searching the internet for research projects or essays, you're going to find a ton of information. How do you know a good source versus a bad one? Anybody can put anything on the internet, and that can be dangerous. So you really need to make sure that every source you come across, you're thinking critically and trying to determine if the author of this source knows what they're talking about. Are they credible? So the guiding question here is, how do I determine a credible source? A few years ago, there was a huge hurricane. You may have heard of it, Hurricane Sandy. Though Hurricane Sandy was a horrible storm and many people suffered greatly, there were a lot of things circulating the internet that just weren't true. Up at the top, we see this picture of a huge tidal wave hitting New York City. This appeared on Twitter quite a bit. This is actually not a real photo. This is not actually an effect of Hurricane Sandy. Down here, this picture was also circulating the internet, and again, it was labeled as one of the effects of Hurricane Sandy. This photo actually came from the movie A Perfect Storm. And then we see this one over here that was going around on Instagram, also a fake photo, not Hurricane Sandy. So I just want you to be aware that not everything you see on the internet is true. Anyone can post a picture, anyone can write an article, anybody can be an author on the internet, and you have to be careful. Another thing I want you to be aware of is bias. So bias is an unfair personal opinion that influences your judgment. For example, my advisory class is the Cal Poly Mustangs. I love the Cal Poly Mustangs. I think they're the greatest cohort. I'm biased, right? This is my cohort. My kids, I think, are the greatest kids in the world. I'm biased, right? I can't make a fair opinion about them sometimes. So you need to be aware that there's bias out there on the internet and in the news. CNN and Fox News are both trustworthy news sources. There's lots of facts on both stations. However, CNN tends to have a bit more of a liberal view, whereas Fox has a more conservative view. So again, this isn't to say that you should never trust anything that CNN says or anything that Fox says. It's just something to be aware of. When you get information from these sources, there might be some bias. Here's a few more tips for finding a credible versus maybe an unreliable source. So when you find something online, you should always look for an author and a date. It's important to look for an author because if somebody isn't taking credit for that work, maybe that work isn't very good. If I know a lot about something and I have the credentials to speak about it, well, I'm going to put my name on that piece. So a missing author could be a red flag. Another thing you should look for is a date. Maybe this is a really outdated source. Maybe this is old information. Sometimes old information is okay. It depends on what you're researching. But if you're looking for something current, you better keep an eye on that date. Second, you want to check that sources are cited. If the website is giving you some facts, well, where did they get this information? Did they provide a bibliography? Did they provide references? Another good tip is to consider the domain. When you have a website that includes .edu, it's usually coming from some sort of university. .gov means it's usually coming from the government. These are generally pretty reliable, but not always. You still need to be aware. Another important tip is to evaluate the site design. Does the web page look nice? Is the layout nice? Are there a ton of ads? Are there ads right there in the middle of the writing? Those can be red flags. So make sure it looks professional. And finally, you want to analyze the writing style. If you come across spelling errors or grammatical errors or wording errors, those could be serious red flags that this source is not reliable. So again, just to recap, some warning signs, we definitely want to look for missing information. A missing author or a missing date is a big red flag. Websites that have domains such as .com, .org, or .net, that in itself does not mean that the source is not reliable, but it's something to be aware of because anybody can get a website with .com, .org, or .net. Many times .org sites are a little biased because they're usually nonprofit organizations and they're trying to raise awareness or raise money about something. Again, that doesn't mean that there aren't facts there. You should just be aware that there is some bias involved. And then finally, be really careful of news articles that you find on social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There's fake news all over those sites. There's great news too. You just need to be really cautious. So right now, I'd like you to get out your Homework 9 packet, and you're going to turn to the third page that says Evaluating Sources handout. On that handout, you're going to find tips, some additional tips on how you can find a credible source. So if you need a minute to get that out of your backpack, go ahead and pause the video while you find Homework 9. Okay, now that you have Homework 9 in front of you, one of your assignments for Homework 9 is to go ahead and annotate those tips using #Cubs and GistNotes. So you can see I've provided an example of what that might look like. Now your annotations should not and do not need to look exactly like mine. But if there was something in this video that you didn't think about before, you might add that to your annotations. So feel free to make changes, but definitely don't feel like you have to copy me. So what I did is I went through and I read the authority, the reliability, and the objective tips. I numbered them 1, 2, and 3. And then I went through and I just circled the who's, the what's. I don't think I found any where's or when's, and maybe some why's. Then I went through and I underlined anything else that felt important. Then I boxed some words that I might not be familiar with. And then I went through and added a little bit of side commentary. So for example, in that authority tip, I circled some of the who's. So this could be a person, group, organization, perhaps a government agency. I underlined background because that's something I definitely want to think about. Does this person, group, organization, or government agency have the background they need to be able to talk about this? Expertise might be a word that I'm not very familiar with, so I boxed it. And then I made a little side note to myself. And I just wanted to remember that as I'm doing my research, I want to consider websites that have domains such as .com, .net, .org. Okay, I did the same thing for reliability. I went through, I circled a who, I underlined some important words I wanted to think of, or sorry, to remember. I didn't find anything that I needed to box here. I also didn't include any side commentary for this one. For the objective, I went through and circled a what, the author's purpose, a why for personal gain, and another what, which is bias. I underlined objective because I think it's really important to ask yourself, can the author be objective here? Are they really thinking about both sides, or are they so bought into one side that they truly can't speak about the topic without bias? And then I added some side commentary. This is just a question for me to think about. How can I be sure I'm getting unbiased information from real news sources? Okay, so for my gist note, remember you can group information together for gist notes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a gist note per paragraph or a gist note per tip in this case. I noticed that all three of these tips has to do with considering the author and if the author has the correct background. So here's a sentence frame that you might use to write a gist note for all three of these tips. It could start like this. When engaging in research, be sure the author is blank, blank, and blank. So I want you to take a couple minutes, go ahead and you're going to pause the video. You're going to look at your annotations for these first three tips. See if there's any changes you want to make based on what you learned, and go ahead and complete a gist note if you haven't already. When you're finished with that, you can go ahead and restart the video. Okay, I hope that last piece was helpful as you went through and annotated and wrote gist notes. I'm going to release you to annotate the rest of these tips using #Hubs and gist notes. This is part of your homework, so go ahead and get this section finished now, and we are looking forward to seeing what you turn in. If you have any questions, please let us know, and keep in mind critical thinking and looking for credible sources, it takes time. Even adults still make mistakes. So, be aware, be critical, and make sure you're finding the best information that you can. Thank you.